Tommy, hello. I'm so pleased to have you
Hi.
here with me. I'm interested in your life actually, but I'm particularly interested in you and being a civil servant. So can I just
No,
start off a
I'm
bit?
glad to be here. So,
Oh, that's great. Um, you studied political science, and one aspect I thought was quite amusing. There was something called administrative studies, which sounds really exciting. And you were not particularly enamored by that, but you were very into volunteering and activism and became then head of the student union in Helsinki and then the whole national Finnish organization. What sort of things did you learn from that?
well, I mean, my background in, or my first lessons in leadership have been in volunteering, and that's what I've done throughout my life. So I started in Scouts at the age of 10, and when you're a Scout, they say once a Scout, always a Scout. So what you learn in Scouts is that you have to be prepared, you have to show initiative, and you motivate people by showing example, but also you have to focus in leadership on motivation. When you work with volunteers, you have to make sure that you understand what gets people going, and that's kind of, I think what, like, being a volunteer leader is a great background to be a civil servant.
Right. And that's also presumably about building teams and things like that and working with teams. Is that true?
That's very true. I mean, what I learned in Scouts, like as a teenager, is that if you want people to work well in meetings, you have to do things outside meetings. So the real team building happens outside meetings. It means that you get to know people as their kind of full selves, but you also have shared experiences. So I've taken my team to, we've had a circus lesson, and we've had drawing lessons, and we've gone cycling, and I think those things are important because those are the moments where you really connect with people.
Oh, right. I must remember that. Learning to be a clown or something, learning to draw
Yeah.
and cycling. No, that's brilliant. Later on, you told me that you
No,
did
I mean
social. Yes.
the clown. Sorry, the clown workshop was really fun because it also showed how different team members handle discomfort
Uh-huh.
and handle awkwardness, and then how
Uh-huh.
other people react when someone is feeling a bit uncomfortable.
Uh-huh. No, that's great. I love it. Um, you also studied social psychology, and what I thought was particularly interesting is that your thesis was on something I think called the language of government, and the whole notion of
Mhm.
language, which I think is beautiful, the way you brought that further into your work. Can you just explain that a bit? Why you thought language was so important?
Well, when I graduated, my thesis was on government policy documents, and
Uh-huh.
at that time, I remember my professor told me that you could have done something that has more relevance. So I decided to focus on government's information society policy, and I
Uh,
looked at the documents and the language and the roles that are given to citizens in different policy documents, and I've actually found that really useful in my work now when we write different kind of government strategic programs. Like, what's the role of the citizen in that program? Is the language that we use, is it something that gets people excited? So what I've tried to do, for instance, a good example is that when I started running the youth department, we really focused on language. We tried to find a language that we can use with city leadership, but also with young people. So we sent our entire staff to the streets of Helsinki to interview more than 1,000 young people in their natural surroundings. And we kind of wanted to understand how they talk about their lives and incorporate that language into the way we talk about our mission. So we went from talk using these fancy words like segregation and social cohesion. We went from that to talking about friends, having things to do, hobbies, using kind of simple words to describe the important work we do.
Yeah, I think that's really, I know that sounds simple, but that feels to me like a real breakthrough. I mean, it connects that link to youth you're talking about. I know you're still very young, but you've had quite a varied career.
No,
I
I mean,
remember.
I mean, I mean, government is a great place to work because you can, as a 40-plus-year-old man, you can still be considered young. So if you want to stay, want to stay young, go and work for government.
That's a new slogan. I think it's a brilliant one.
Yeah.
But I mean, for example, at the European City of Culture 20 years ago, you worked with Dodo on urban utopias, and that was also youth with youth. Then you were at the European Cultural Foundation and developed the youth program. Then you switched to Demos Helsinki, interesting organization, where you looked a lot at behavioral change and pro-social behavior. Um, Anyway, but one phrase that you said as we went through that before you then got into the city council, you said, I like translating big phenomena into real life experiences. Can you just explain that interesting phrase?
Well, I mean, I think quite often, at least I've heard quite a few times that it said that management needs to walk the talk. But I've realized that I think as important, if not even more important, is kind of talking the walk. So
Okay.
so helping people, like kind of, I think as a public service leader, your job is to like work between these like kind of very concrete actions that are carried out and the strategic programs of the government and the massive phenomena that we're trying to solve. So what I find myself doing quite often is that when I'm in meetings with the mayor, let's say, and we talk about something big like social cohesion, I think it's really important that you are able to give very concrete, like kind of tangible examples of how does that translate into people's experiences. And the other way around, when I meet like, librarians, I think as a leader, your job is to say, what you just did there is exactly what the city wants to do. That's exactly the city's strategic mission. So helping people see how the bold statements turn into concrete actions, and the other way around, how concrete actions are examples of policy change. Because I think it goes back to people feeling that their work makes a difference, that your work has bigger value than the concrete actions that you carry out.
Yeah, I mean, given that your varied background and so on, you probably had quite a few opportunities along the way. Why did you then decide to become a public servant or want to be one?
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, as you started from the administrative studies, I went to study political science, and they told us at the university that when the baby boomers will retire, there's going to be jobs for you to choose, and the wisest thing you can do is go to administrative studies. And when I studied, I was like, I'm not that interested in being a civil servant. Kind of the brand of civil servants wasn't very good. So I decided to go more into activism and kind of political science and rhetorics and kind of traditional politics. But actually, I think that background is extremely useful nowadays because people's expectations toward government have also changed. So why I wanted to go to government is that working in a think tank on government innovation, you're very often telling people how they should change their work. And I kind of wanted to see if I can carry out the same kind of principles that I'm teaching to other people on lectures. And because I think if you work with government innovation, you focus quite a lot on or kind of civil sector innovation. You work mostly on new ideas and new great ideas. But I think what really I found motivating to work in government is really to focus on kind of people's experiences and how they can be translated into better services.
Yeah, but
Because it's very why I love working for local government, especially because it's really concrete. You can't escape people. You're really working with real people. Like we're talking about what kind of astroturf should we
yeah,
have on a soccer field.
yeah, you can't avoid it, or if the garbage is not being taken away, it's not been taken
Hmm.
away. I know that's simplistic. Yeah, you're completely right. But what I'm quite interested in is you became head of youth, I think, in 2012, and you were young. Okay, let's say young, 34, and I think it was useful that you were quite young and not 87. But anyway, it must have been quite a challenge. For you to suddenly be responsible for 350 people staff. And what you said to me, and I thought that was really interesting, people always gave me a chance. They said, okay, we'll give you a chance. And has that actually become part of your own ethos to give others a chance?
Like, I think most of the things that have happened to me, and I've been very fortunate that there's been a lot of people throughout my career who've said, actually openly said, you're not very experienced yet, but I'll give you a chance. And
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna and they didn't do it in a way that like they throw you to the wolves and see if you manage. It was more like, I trust you, I'm gonna give you this chance, and I'm gonna help you. And I know from a personal experience what that means. Like, I was hired to build a European program for a European foundation as a person who had only lived in Finland by then. And the director of the European Culture Foundation said very openly, said, you're not very experienced, but you have potential. And I know from a personal experience what it means when people think that you have potential and they provide help. And that's what we want to do in Helsinki's Culture and Leisure Services. We want to provide kind of generosity. We want to demonstrate generosity. We want to demonstrate that people have the right to experiences. I do think that if people have a broad range of experiences, especially as young people and as children, their whole perspective on life changes. If you feel that you are worthy of all these experiences, you don't have to like all the experiences that you get, but that people trust you, people help you, people give you a chance. And that's why, I mean, my division produces around 20 million experiences to people on a yearly basis. And I think those are transformative. And it's the combination of those individual experiences that's transformative, not the individual experiences.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, what one thing it just struck me after the youth thing, Helsinki only then had 5 departments from 30 and so on. So you had even more responsibility. So I'm just thinking about that. Now, that aside, tell me some examples that you are quite interesting. You mentioned something about migrants and the
Hmm.
elderly. I mean, you had a couple of examples which I thought were really very revealing.
Probably my favorite project from the last couple of years is a project that started from a problem and it turned into hope and hopeful solutions. So we noticed a couple of years ago that it was 7 times more likely for young people with a migrant background to be outside the labor market and outside education. 7 times more likely than for people who spoke Finnish at home. So we wanted to approach this issue that's a very systemic problem. There's systemic racism, but there's also other things in play. We wanted to approach it in a new way. Helsinki has been investing for quite some time on service design. So we decided to take a year to really focus on understanding the issue that we're solving and really making sure that we are solving the right issue. So we partnered up with a service design agency and we spent a year with a lot of volunteer staff, a lot of young people, a lot of police workers, social workers, on really understanding what the issue here is. And we noticed that a lot of young people, going back to my previous answer, a lot of young people felt that they are not given a fair chance, that they felt that they have a lot to give, but they don't have the chance to demonstrate that they are worthy, that they are useful, that they were treated as objects of government innovations. And and quite often it's a well-meaning help, but you really kind of objectify people into kind of these weak people that can only survive on government help, whereas their personal experience was that they have obstacles that need to be overcome, but they have a lot to give. Aristotle has said that a good life is a life where you can use your skills for the benefit of your community. So that's what we wanted to do here. So we decided to focus on teenagers and young adults. So some of the programs that were really successful are that we partnered up with our senior care, and we decided to give job opportunities for young people, migrant young people who didn't get to the labor market easily. So their job opportunity was that they helped seniors, mostly World War II veterans, in kind of simple things at home. They went for walks, they did a little repair work at home, they went to the bingo with them, they went to grocery stores with them. So these young people got job experience. They could say that they worked for the city. They did work that demands trust. And these elderly people got someone else to go into their home than only nurses. And those encounters are remarkable. And we've now given these job experiences to more than 1,000 young people. And we know from the data that more than half of those young people that we've given an opportunity through this program have gotten a job elsewhere after that. And it's an incredibly inexpensive program. The other thing that we did inside the same project was that we noticed that there's a lot of teenagers, especially teenagers with a migrant background in school, who get really negative feedback on their school performance. The parents say that you should do better, the teachers say that you should do better, but they're not recognized for the talents they have. So we built this program where these 14, 15-year-olds are running these after-school programs for 7 and 8-year-olds in their own school. So they're helping these 7 and 8-year-olds on their homework, on learning Finnish, on learning math. And suddenly, these young people who are seen also by teachers easily as poor performers suddenly became the pioneers of school climate, school culture. They got much more motivated to study themselves as well when their skills were recognized. So this program is now run in more than 40 schools in Helsinki. So, and there's more than nearly 9,000 students involved in this program, and we're not paying them. They don't get any financial compensation for that. So I think
what's interesting.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, what's interesting about that is, in a way, we're saying culture and leisure, but that's education. So none of these issues are all in one box. I mean, so much of what you're saying is you're finding solutions to one issue that solves many problems, if you see what I'm saying, at the same time.
Exactly. Like we've a similar example is that we've focused on physical activity. So we know that physical inactivity is one of the biggest problems, especially for developed countries. So because of our lifestyles nowadays, we don't move enough, we don't stand enough, we don't walk enough, and so on. So, but mostly when people walk and stand and go for a run and so on, they don't do it because of physical activity. So we actually noticed that if we want to promote physical activity, we need to focus on things like better learning, culture, loneliness, social relations. And actually, this program has been incredibly successful when teachers feel that when they promote physical activity, they also promote better learning. We know that our senior care people, when they promote physical activity, they also promote tackling loneliness. And we know that when we promote physical activity like cycling, we are also tackling climate change. So I think this is what cities can do. And I think the culture and leisure sector has a tremendous opportunity because it has the most flexibility from government services, at least here in Finland. Like my colleagues who run healthcare, who run education, it's quite like legislation gives very strict guidelines on how things can be done, whereas ours is fairly free. So we should utilize that flexibility and also do it together with other sectors.
Yeah, no, it really struck me in all your examples that this silo breaking was not, you weren't saying, let's break a silo. You were saying, let's do a project that happened to break a silo. And so that flip is really interesting.
But it also means that you have to I think all of these successful projects start from this very humble notion that we don't know enough. So
Yeah.
we sent the youth workers on the streets, really listening to young people. We spent a year understanding migrant youth. I've, as part of this physical activity program, I myself have gone to homes of seniors to really understand how it is to take care of a spouse who needs help to get out of bed. And and only by having that real connection, as even as senior leaders, I think that only by having that real connection to real people, we understand that these people are more than what we see in our government statistics. They have a lot
This
of strength.
remind
They have a lot of talent. Yeah.
It reminds me again of the thing about the big issues and really getting to the real life experience again that you said earlier. Um,
And
just one
I
question.
noticed that, for instance, the I went to the home of this couple in their 70s, and I do notice that I'm like somehow emotionally committed to them. I've become a champion for them. Like when we talk about solutions in senior care, I always go back to that couple and I'm like, would this work for them? How would they feel if we talk to them like this? And I
Uh-huh,
think that's
uh-huh.
why senior leaders really need to put themselves out there. It's really uncomfortable, but you learn a lot.
Uh-huh. I mean, when we add all the bits that you put together, there's a different way of doing things. But can I just ask you one question? You're probably the first openly gay person in a really very senior position. And what you've always said is, look, it's so important to just be authentically yourself. Is there anything to say about that, or is that all fine? Do you think it's relevant that even that question?
I think it's very relevant. I think for most of my life, I've had to deal with a sense of shame. I think if you belong to a sexual minority, that's kind of given to you by your culture, unfortunately. Uh, and you're very used to reading the room in a way. Like, is this a safe space for me? Is this a space where I can talk about my spouse? I know how I edit myself still. I know that I have to come out several times in a week, and I know a lot of citizens have that. And sometimes it translates into anger, sometimes it translates into detachment. But if you provide the right environment, like I've been fortunate to get in Helsinki and in all these NGOs, I know that that experience of discomfort, that experience of shame becomes like a superpower, because it gives you, as a senior leader, it gives you so much perspective on why people behave the way they do. I know that I belong only to one minority, and next to that I'm a white, fairly well off, educated, able man. But I also understand that, like, I'm part of a minority, but it's not all that I am. And I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what we need to learn in government. And I think the whole question of equity, the whole question of diversity is probably the biggest thing that we need to tackle over the next couple of years, next to climate change. So I've been very fortunate to be given the chance, and I'm very happy that I've had that opportunity, for instance, to start a network of LGBT staff in Helsinki.
Uh-huh,
And
uh-huh.
the response was enormous. That in a way that the employer recognizes that sexual orientation can be a strength also.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. I think that's a lovely way to sort of conclude our conversation. I hope we have many, many more. What
Yeah.
I'm really taking from this is also a word you use, that sense of listening, humility, and so on, which really implies a different sort of public servant than the one we have in our images of those, our stereotypes. So thanks a lot, Tommy, and I hope we speak soon again.
Thanks so much, and it's always a pleasure.